Some moments aren't just seen, they're felt. It begins with a look that stops the world, eyes that don't just glance but linger, reading every unspoken truth. Then comes the pull, slow and inevitable, a magnetic force that feels written in the stars, leading to touches and kisses that rewrite everything you thought you knew about love. Nights don't just pass here, they become lifetimes, wrapped in warmth, tenderness, and fire that stays long after the darkness fades. Even when morning arrives, the echoes remain, reminding that this wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was a beginning, a connection that lingers in body and soul. Welcome to a place where every story is raw, real, and unforgettable. Here, love is not just told, it's lived, breathed, and experienced in every heartbeat. It began with the smallest of things, a glance that seemed almost accidental, barely noticeable to anyone else in the room. Yet for that moment, it held the weight of everything unspoken. The air shifted in a way that could not be ignored, as if a quiet current had pulled through the space and brushed against something long dormant. There was a charge in it, subtle but electric, a sensation that hummed beneath the skin and made the pulse quicken in ways that words could never capture. He didn't do anything extraordinary, no gesture, no bold move, nothing that would mark the moment for an outsider. Yet in that look, everything shifted. It was a recognition that went beyond logic, beyond circumstance. Something unseen had clicked into place, and suddenly the room felt smaller and the world outside irrelevant. Curiosity stirred first, a gentle tug at the edges of awareness. Something in the way his gaze lingered, just fractionally longer than expected, invited attention. It was not a stare meant to provoke, but a quiet acknowledgement that he had noticed, really noticed, and in noticing, had quietly rearranged the way the space around them existed. There was a sense of destiny in it, though subtle, almost imperceptible, as though this moment had been written elsewhere, long before either of them had stepped into the classroom. The heartbeat responded before the mind could catch up. A warmth rose unbidden, a fluttering that wasn't fear, nor anticipation exactly, but the kind of stirring that makes the body aware that something meaningful is approaching. The chest tightened in a way that demanded attention, and every subtle movement he made, every blink, every slight shift of posture, became magnified, laden with significance. A part of the mind argued with itself. It was a glance, a simple glance. Why should it matter? But that part was quiet, unable to override the flood of sensations the rest of the body carried. Fingers itched to move, to reach, though there was no reason, no permission, nothing tangible to guide them. The pull was entirely internal, entirely silent, a magnetic tug that ignored reason. The curiosity evolved into a quiet longing, not urgent, not desperate, but persistent. There was a desire to know more, to understand more, to see the contours of this connection that had been sparked without any words. Every passing second was both fleeting and infinite, each breath measured against the slow unraveling of a new awareness. And then came the forbidden thrill, barely perceptible at first, like a shadow at the edge of consciousness. It was the understanding that this attention, this spark, existed in a space that society, circumstances, and caution might deem unremarkable or inappropriate. That tension only made the feeling more acute, more insistent. The heart, unbidden, leapt at the possibilities, even as the mind cautioned restraint. There was a beauty in the simplicity of it. No dramatic declaration, no sudden boldness, just the pure, unspoken recognition that something profound had begun. The room could have been full of noise and chaos, and yet it fell away into near silence, leaving only the awareness of that spark between them. The awareness that, in that instant, time had shifted subtly, quietly, without fanfare. It wasn't love yet, not fully, but it was a beginning, the kind that makes a soul pause and notice itself. the kind that marks the difference between mere passing moments and moments that linger in memory, that etch themselves into the quiet chambers of thought, waiting to be explored, and once noticed, it cannot be unrecognized, cannot be ignored, cannot be undone. The fluttering became a constant hum, one that followed every glance and every movement for the rest of the day. It settled not just in the chest, but in the mind, in the way attention sharpened, in the way mundane details seemed to gain new significance. Every step, every passing shadow, every sound became a part of this invisible tether, a reminder that the spark had been lit, and it refused to dim. Some moments do not announce themselves. They do not demand recognition with grandeur. They slip quietly into awareness, then spread gradually and insistently until the world itself seems to realign around them. This was such a moment, a quiet collision of awareness, curiosity, and desire, the kind that begins to whisper its presence even before the heart dares to speak its name. It was impossible to know what would come next. The mind tried to speculate, tried to predict, tried to contain it within logic and reason. But the body and the soul knew something else entirely, that in this glance, in this quiet acknowledgement, a story had begun, one that could not be reversed, one that would follow its own rhythm, one that would grow in ways that could not yet be seen. And so the day continued, full of ordinary motions and background noise, but for the one who felt it, nothing was ordinary anymore. Every movement, every word, every glance from him carried potential, weight, and meaning. The spark had been ignited quietly, subtly, irrevocably. Some sparks remained small, flickering only briefly, then extinguished by circumstance or indifference. This one burned differently. It lingered, persistent and unyielding, a quiet force that demanded attention, that invited exploration, that promised something beyond mere curiosity. And in that lingering, in that awareness of the spark, it became clear. The story had begun, and nothing would ever feel the same again. Every meeting began like a quiet storm, small, subtle, and almost imperceptible, yet carrying a current that ran deeper than anything spoken. It wasn't reckless, not in the way that leaves you breathless and uncertain. It was deliberate, magnetic, like two bodies, two souls, had been circling each other for lifetimes without realizing it. The energy between them was tangible, an invisible thread tugging steadily, pulling closer without demand. Every glance, every word, every barely brushed hand carried weight. There was tension in the silence, in the pauses between sentences, in the small spaces where bodies leaned without knowing why. The first time the hands almost met, it was accidental, or so it seemed. Fingers grazed, the briefest touch that lingered far longer than the seconds it lasted. The warmth spread like fire, slow and deep, tracing paths that had been asleep for years. There was nothing hurried about it. It wasn't lust in its raw, careless form. It was the awareness of connection, the recognition that this closeness was inevitable, fated even, and could not be ignored. Every conversation was underscored by this tension. Words were said, but the real language existed in glances and the way bodies unconsciously leaned toward each other. When laughter passed between them, it vibrated differently, filling the chest in ways that made the heart rate stutter. Every shared breath became a secret, a signal that something unspoken was building, and no matter how hard the mind tried to rationalize it, the pull only strengthened. There was danger in the thrill of it, yes, not because it was wrong, but because it demanded surrender. Letting go of control is never easy, especially when the mind warns of consequences, and yet the body defies reason. Each brush of hair from a falling strand, each close conversation over a shared cup of coffee, every lingering look across a room, made the distance between them shrink without words, as if the universe itself conspired to close it. At times, it felt as if the world faded entirely, leaving only two beings orbiting each other. The sound of footsteps, passing conversations, the rustle of leaves, all became background hums to the main event, the electric tension that neither could name, yet both understood fully. It was magnetic, irresistible, and terrifying in its inevitability. Even the quiet moments carried desire, sitting side by side, neither reaching, neither retreating, but close enough that warmth leaked from one to the other in ways that words could never capture. Every heartbeat was audible in the chest, every inhale synchronized unknowingly. It was a constant, gentle pressure, like the tide moving slowly yet relentlessly, until resistance became impossible. Nothing about the attraction was accidental. It was composed of countless small choices, each converging toward a single, unspoken understanding. The closeness that had once been impossible was now unavoidable. When voices lowered slightly, when laughter softened, when hands finally found each other in an accidental but welcomed clasp, it was the fulfillment of a tension that had been building quietly but insistently. And yet there was patience in it, a deliberate pacing that made each interaction more charged than the last. There was anticipation, and with it, the understanding that the moment, when it finally came, would be more than the sum of its parts. Every glance, every brush of hands, every shared secret smile was a step along a path towards something neither could fully articulate, but both recognized in every instinct of body and soul. The tension didn't dissipate with time. It evolved, deepened, became a force that neither could resist. It was exhilarating and frightening, intimate and expansive, delicate and insistent. Even in mundane moments, there was an undercurrent of desire, a reminder that some connections transcend explanation. Every interaction was a dance, every touch a note in a song that had been composed long before either knew its melody. And when that moment of surrender finally arrived, it was not a release, but a fulfillment. The tension transformed into closeness, the magnetic pull became tangible, and the invisible thread became a chain, unbreakable and deliberate. It was inevitable, and in that inevitability it was perfect. Some desires are fleeting, some are passing flares, but this was different. It didn't fade, didn't waver. It lingered, echoing in every breath, in every glance, in every quiet corner of the mind, reminding that some connections were written beyond time itself. It was impossible to ignore, and it was impossible to forget. The nights arrived quietly, but they carried with them a weight that was impossible to ignore. Alone in a world that moved on its own schedule, there were moments that belonged only to the two of us, hidden from the eyes of others, yet full of a presence that made everything else disappear. It wasn't just the thrill of being unseen, it was the intimacy of knowing that this connection, fragile in its secrecy, was real, tangible, and undeniable. Every touch felt amplified, every glance sharper, every sigh heavier because it existed in a space meant for no one else. There was a rhythm to it, almost like a heartbeat shared across distance, guiding us toward each other without words. When hands met, it was electric yet tender, a paradox that made each encounter feel sacred. Fingers brushed along the edges of palms, tracing lines like cartographers mapping an undiscovered territory, learning every contour as though memorizing something precious. Each brush of skin was a language, each lingering hold a sentence, each gentle press a paragraph in a story written without ink. Kisses weren't hurried, they unfolded slowly, as if we were both aware that rushing would break the spell. Lips met with a softness that betrayed the urgency beneath, a pulse of longing held in check by the reverence of the moment. It was never merely desire, it was recognition, an acknowledgement that what was happening had been waiting in the shadows, ready to emerge when the night provided its sanctuary. The thrill of secrecy lent a fire to our passion that daylight could never match. Knowing that no one else could witness these encounters made them sharper, more immediate, more alive. Every sigh and heartbeat was a signal, a private code between two souls who had discovered a sanctuary in each other. There was a freedom in it, paradoxical as it seemed, a freedom born not from recklessness, but from trust, from the understanding that what was happening was precious and fleeting. Time stretched and contracted within these stolen nights. Moments that would have been ordinary in the sunlight became extraordinary in the dim glow of lamp light or candle flame. Shadows played along the walls, but we didn't see them, we only saw each other. The air was thick with warmth and tension, with anticipation and release, a tangible mix that left no part of us untouched. Each encounter was a careful balance between restraint and surrender, a dance that neither of us wanted to end. Even when apart, the memory of these nights lingered like a fragrance on the skin. The touch of fingers, the brush of lips, the quiet hum of presence. They stayed long after we had returned to our separate worlds. Thoughts of the stolen hours made ordinary routines shimmer with expectation, made mundane spaces pulse with hidden possibility. Every heartbeat seemed to echo with the knowledge that another night would come, another moment where we could exist solely for each other. It wasn't just about passion, though that was undeniable. It was about tenderness, the kind that softened the edges of desire and made it something more enduring. Every whispered word, every careful gesture, every moment of quiet after the rush was proof that connection wasn't measured by the hours together, but by the depth with which those hours were felt. It was a love that could hide in shadows but radiated light, a paradox held together by presence, trust, and an unspoken understanding. The secrecy gave it urgency, yes, but also intimacy. Each meeting was a reminder of what it meant to be seen, to be desired, to be understood. The world outside might never know, but inside these moments there was clarity, honesty, and a full surrender to what was real. Nothing else mattered. No rules, no schedules, no expectations. Only the rhythm of hearts beating in quiet synchrony, only the electric warmth of being entirely present with someone who understood every unspoken piece of you. Even as dawn threatened to spill its light and pull us back into ordinary life, the memory of these nights stayed. They were more than moments. They were awakenings, lessons in vulnerability, intimacy, and the extraordinary power of connection. And though the world would continue in its usual course, the fire we had discovered in the shadows would remain, ready to ignite again whenever night offered its sanctuary. Some nights aren't just nights. They are beginnings. The world had rules, spoken and unspoken, that said this shouldn't happen, that this connection couldn't survive, that it wasn't meant to be. Every whisper from outside seemed to insist on restraint, caution, and conformity. But the heart has a stubbornness of its own, a quiet rebellion that refuses to bow to expectations. It recognized something undeniable, something rare that existed beyond logic and circumstance. From the very first moment, it was clear that this was more than fleeting desire. It was a recognition, a knowing that defied time, logic, and reason. Every glance, every word, every breath carried a weight that could not be dismissed. Even when the world told it to pause, to step back, to obey, the pull persisted. It was in the way fingers brushed without permission, in the way eyes met and held, in the silence between words that spoke louder than any declaration could. There were obstacles, quiet and loud, obvious and subtle. Family expectations, the hum of gossip, the murmur of caution in the air, all attempted to plant doubt, to dim the spark, and yet the connection only deepened. Each challenge became a mirror, reflecting the undeniable truth that this was meant to be, that the bond was unshakable. Even the smallest shared moments, a hand lingering on a shoulder, a whispered question, a hesitant smile, carried a gravity that rooted the connection ever deeper. Time itself seemed to bend around it. Days stretched in anticipation, and nights were charged with unspoken intensity. Every encounter was heightened because of the impossibility surrounding it. There was a sense of urgency not born of impatience but of inevitability, as if each heartbeat was writing a story the world wasn't yet ready to understand. Yet within that urgency lay patience, a patience of the soul, knowing that what was true could not be rushed, could not be forced, could not be taken lightly. There were stolen conversations and secret glances, moments when the world disappeared and only this connection existed. Every touch, every gesture, every word exchanged carried layers of meaning that could not be unpacked quickly. It was in these layers that the depth of the love revealed itself, not flashy, not loud, but profound and unwavering. The ordinary became extraordinary, and even the simplest interactions felt like a communion of souls who had recognized each other before time itself began. The nights were often the most revealing. In the quiet darkness, when the world's rules faded into background noise, the heart could speak freely. Every embrace was both protection and surrender, every whispered sentiment both a promise and a confession. And even as doubts tried to creep in from the outside, the bond remained untouched, resilient against the noise and the judgment. It was a defiance, not out of rebellion, but out of necessity. To let go would be to deny a truth that had already imprinted itself on every fiber of being. It wasn't always easy. Moments of uncertainty crept in, when outside pressure seemed insurmountable, when fear whispered that this was impossible. But the recognition of what this was, what it had become, refused to allow retreat. Every challenge only reinforced it, proving that when something is real and profound, it will survive not in spite of the rules, but alongside them, carving its own space where expectation cannot intrude. Even in the quiet aftermath of trials, when the world seemed calm, the love persisted, humming beneath the surface. It had left an indelible mark, an imprint that neither distance, time, nor circumstance could erase. Each memory carried both fire and tenderness, proof that the connection had survived against odds, proof that when the heart truly recognizes, it cannot be ignored. And so every glance, every touch, every unspoken word reaffirmed the truth. This was more than desire, more than fleeting passion. It was a rare, profound connection that challenged the rules, defied expectation, and redefined what it meant to love. Some love refuses to be tamed. If this story stirred something deep inside, let it live there. For more heart-touching, unforgettable tales that linger long after the night ends, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Every story here is a journey you can feel.